Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory, and this is my top 50 favorite board games of all time series. It's been almost a full year since I did my last one, so this is my 2020 edition, technically. We have other members of Talking Cardboard joining me as I get closer to my top 10 favorite board games of all time, so they will join in and give their top 10 favorites. John, another member of Talking Cardboard, he is doing his own separate series of videos as well, giving his top 30 favorite board games of all time, so make sure you go jump over to his videos and check out his picks as well. But without further ado, let's get started. Okay, and before we get started, I just wanted to kind of let you know on how I'm doing my list this year. Last year, I did 10 different segments, chopping up my top 50 list in 5 different games at a time. This year, I'm going to do it in 8 segments. So it'll go a little bit quicker, and I need to catch up with John because he's already started his list. So I'm doing it a little bit different this year. I am starting with my games 50 down to 41, and then 40 down to 31. And then from then on, I'm doing it in segments of 5. So the first 2 segments will be 10 games at a time, and then the last 6 segments will be 5 games at a time as we get closer and closer to my number 1 game. Also, I won't be getting in depth on a full rules explanation or an explanation on how the game really plays. In this series of videos, I'm just going over my main pros for the game and why it made it on that spot on my list. So let's get started with game number 50. Alright, so the first game on my list, game number 50, is a very light card game, kind of got some drafting mechanism and an auction mechanism to it, and one that I've owned in my collection for many, many years, but this is the first time that it's cracked my top 50 games list, and this game is Biblios. Like I said, a light drafting auction style card game. Haven't really brought it out to many of my friends or my game group. I usually play this game with mainly family or my wife. But basically in this game, the reason why I like it so much is that it's got a very simple rule set. And also the drafting in it is so light and fun. And the 2 different parts to the game are really fun as well. You basically get a hand of cards. You get to keep 1 card for yourself. You give 1 card to each of your opponents, your choice. And the last card left in your hand gets put face down into the center of the table for the second half of the game, where you will be using the cards you've drafted to then auction for those cards in the center of the table. So it's really fun. You're basically just trying to collect cards, different sets of cards for points at the end of the game. You're also collecting these gold value cards, and the more gold you have, the better it is, or the easier it is to auction off the cards that are left in the middle at the end of the game. And the reason why that's really cool too is that sometimes you get a hand where all the cards are just extremely good and you want to keep them all for yourself, but you are forced to keep only 1, give the rest to your opponents, and that one that you might put face down in the center of the table might be a really, really good card as well, and also all your opponents are doing the same thing. So it's kind of a balance between keeping point cards and keeping gold cards to use those to bid for the cards in the second half of the game, which is the auction. So that is Biblios. This game has actually dropped 12 places since last year, down to 49, but it is still in my top 50, still a game I enjoy a lot, and one that my wife really wants to play every time we sit down at the table. This game is Kingsburg. Kingsburg, a light game where you're rolling dice and allocating those dice for resources. You then can use those resources to build buildings and combo those buildings to give you special abilities, special effects, to ultimately get the most victory points by the end of the game. It is a fairly quick game, especially at 2 players. It plays really quickly. You've got 12 different places on the board with different advisors that give you different resources and abilities and that sort of thing. And you can use as many of your 3 dice as you want to place on a spot. You add them all together. But if you can roll particular numbers that help you, let's say you roll a 2, you can use that number 2 advisor, and let's say the other 2 dice are a 4 and a 5, you can combine those to put on the 9 advisor to get that special ability. So it's a game where you're just trying to balance your different options with the 3 dice that you roll to do the best you can to combo with the buildings on your player board, because each of the buildings on your player board have different cost requirements for resources. So balancing what you're doing on the main board with what you're building on your personal board is the whole fun of this game, and it is a lot of fun. The expansion is pretty much essential. It adds more variations to the buildings, so the game doesn't feel the same every time. So I'd highly recommend that, but that is Kingsburg. Okay, and my number 48 game is also a new game to the list. Surprise, surprise, but it is a game that just came out within about the last year, so it is a very new game. Another filler-style card game. I think we'll see a lot of those on this segment of the list here, because that's just kind of where they fell on this list. But this game is Point Salad. Point Salad, a surprise hit to me. I picked it up just expecting kind of a light filler, nothing too fancy about it, but really it surprised the heck out of me for how smooth the gameplay is and how fun it is, and the different goals you're going after. A very simple game. You have 3 different draw piles of cards. You flip over 2 cards face up from each of the piles to create a board of 6 different vegetable cards. What's really neat about this game is that there's vegetables on one side of the card and point scoring goals on the back side of the card. On your turn, you can either take 2 of the vegetables that are face up, or you can take 1 of the face down draw piles for points. So the points might be have the most tomatoes by the end of the game. So you might take that goal card off the top. So then now you have that goal in front of you for the rest of the game, and you might be trying to collect and make sure you have the most tomatoes out of all of your opponents in order to score the allotted victory points on that backside of the card. So like I said, just a lot of fun trying to balance with what vegetable cards you're going to take, or if you're going to take one of the stacks of goal cards. You can have as many goal cards as you want in front of you because they're not worth negative points at the end of the game if you don't complete them. But you want to be careful not to take too many goal cards, because every time you take a goal card on your turn, you're passing up on taking more vegetables that can then complete those goal cards for you. So a lot of fun, really fun balancing act to try to compute and try to get the most points you can. So just a quick light filler game that's a lot of fun, and I have enjoyed it every time I've played it, and it's never gone poorly at the table with all of my friends either. So definitely one to check out. That is Point Salad. Okay, and my number 47 game dropped 18 spots from last year. So a really big drop. No fault of it to the game at all. The game is still fantastic. Obviously, it's still in my top 50 favorite games of all time, so it has that going for it. It's just a little bit of an older game, and there's so many great new games coming out recently that the numbers kind of got bumped around a little bit. And also, I've been playing a lot of newer games, and more newer games have been kind of getting to the table more recently, so it's harder and harder to get our older games played. But this game is Chimera Station. Chimera Station is no stranger to this channel at all. If you've seen any of my other videos, I've talked about Chimera Station plenty of times. It is a fun worker placement game where you are able to splice your workers that you're placing with different body parts. Each you and your opponent start off with the same type of workers at the beginning of the game. They can all do the same thing, just a basic action at the spots, but what different body parts you are able to splice to those workers make each and every one of them so unique. And that is really fun, really, really fun. I mainly enjoy doing that above anything else in this game. It's just that much fun. You have brains that you can attach to get you more victory points, tentacles grab you more resources when you visit a spot. You can add these crab-like claws to your workers as well, and those will bump people off different spaces. And then also you can add these leaf hands to your workers, and they can actually eat the leaves at the end of the round to feed themselves instead of you having to try to collect food to feed your workers. Because if you can't feed your workers, you start taking negative victory points at the end of each round. So anyway, I've talked about it plenty in my other videos, so that is Chimera Station. Okay, and on to my number 46 game. This game dropped 5 spots from last year, but it's still holding pretty steady, pretty much in the same spot. This game is Roll for the Galaxy. So Roll for the Galaxy, it actually replaced its older brother for me, Race for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy is the card version of this game, whereas Roll for the Galaxy, you guessed it, you're using dice. But it's a ton of fun. You are rolling out dice behind a player screen, so everything is private. The biggest thing I would like about Roll for the Galaxy is kind of the same thing I liked about Race for the Galaxy, but Roll for the Galaxy just plays in much quicker time for me, so that quicker player time is what I really enjoy about it over its older brother. The mechanism I really enjoy is where you've got 5 different actions you can do. What's unique is you're choosing one to be your main action, and the other ones are sub-actions. So what that means is that your main action you automatically get to do no matter what, regardless of if your opponents do that action or not. Your sub actions are you trying to guess what your opponents are planning to do, because if your opponents choose one of your sub actions as their main action, then you also get to take that action. You're building out planets, you're trying to develop planets and new technologies, trying to get victory points, doing that the best you can. You're rolling dice behind a player screen, so everything is private. Nobody else knows what you're doing. You don't know what your opponents are doing, and you're just really trying to plan for obviously what you want to get done, but also trying to guess what your opponents are doing so you can piggyback off them and do multiple actions on your turn instead of just one action. So that is Roll for the Galaxy. Okay, and my number 45 game dropped 13 spots, so quite a bit of a dip again, but this game is pretty much a 2-player exclusive game. You can play it with 4 players, 2v2, but I've only ever played it with 2-player, and I can't really imagine how well it could work with 4 players anyway, so that could be the reason why it's dropping a little bit. It's harder and harder to get this game to the table. It also plays in about 3 hours time, so it's hard to kind of try to find 3.5 hours of your time to spend during the night with only 2 players, and I don't think it's really a game my wife would enjoy either, so it makes it even more difficult to get to the table, but it's still an excellent game, an outstanding game, and it is Star Wars in a box, Star Wars Rebellion. So Star Wars Rebellion, like I said, people say, and they are correct, that it's like Star Wars in a box. It takes episodes 4, 5, and 6 in the movie series, and really combines those 3 movies very effectively. Every time you sit down to play this game, it feels like you are just enveloped in the Star Wars universe. It just really feels like you're a part of it, going out and kind of playing in a sandbox of different options that you can do. But it's very asymmetric. One player plays the Empire, the other player plays the Rebellion. The Rebellion hides their base on one of the planets, unbeknownst to your opponent. The Empire's goal is to try to find that base and destroy the base before the end of the game is triggered. All in the while, the Rebellion, as they're hiding out on one of the planets trying to hide from the Empire, they're trying to complete missions to get the mission tracker closer and closer to the end goal. If the Rebellion can complete enough of their little mission cards to get to that end game goal, they win, whereas if the Empire can find where the Rebellion is hiding and destroy their base, then the Empire wins. So it's a tug-of-war game. It's got some combat, it's got some resource exploitation to try to build up your troops, it's got these different missions that you're trying to successfully complete, and on both sides it feels very different for both sides, but yet just as fun for both sides. You know, it doesn't really matter anytime I play this game, it doesn't matter what side I'm on, I have a good time. So that is Star Wars Rebellion. Okay, and my number 44 game has actually jumped up 5 places this year, which is kind of strange because I haven't really gotten the game played a lot over the last year. But having said that, each year I make my list from scratch. I don't look at my previous year's list at all before making this list, so just whatever games I think are the most fun each and every year, I write down and just see how they compare to my previous year's list. So this is where it fell. This game is Coal Baron. Coal Baron is a game I've talked about on many of my other lists, many of my other videos. If you want to go and check out some of those other videos, I've talked about it plenty. So I don't need to talk about it a ton here, but just a game that resurfaces to the top every time I think about it. It's a very smooth, simple playing game. What I like about it most is that you're fulfilling contracts by digging coal out of a mine and trying to get it onto the elevator to the top of the mine to fulfill these contracts. So it's a lot of fun. You've got this little simple action board in the center of the table. It's worker placement. You're sending these workers out to these different spots to do different actions. Like I said, you're trying to dive down into the mine on an elevator to collect coal and get the coal onto the elevator to bring it to the top of the mine to fulfill contracts in various ways. That's one of the things I love, is just about how to best manipulate the coal that you're gathering versus the contracts you need to complete. The other thing I really enjoy in this game is every round you have a set amount of workers. I believe it's like 20 workers that you get to place on the main board. But every time you go to a spot, the next person to go there has to place one more worker than you had previously placed. So for example, if I go on a spot to manipulate my elevator and I put a worker down on that action, now if my opponent wants to do that same action, they have to put 2 workers there instead of 1. And now if I want to do that elevator action after they had done it, I have to place 3 of my workers there. So you can kind of see how that builds really quickly, and you kind of chew through your 20 workers really fast. Just doing that action twice, it already took 4 out of my 20 workers just to do that action twice. So a lot of fun, and one that is not talked about hardly at all anymore, but definitely one that you should seek out if you haven't played it yet. Okay, and my number 43 has actually gone up 1 spot, and like the previous game, Coal Baron, this game it's kind of unique. I haven't gotten into the table, and it's still kind of staying steady. So another attest to a great game, and one that I really enjoy, is that if it can stay in the same spot without me looking at my previous year's list at all, it just tells you how much I really do enjoy the game, and this game is Ethnos. What I enjoy most about this game is that you're trying to vie for control over these different areas on the board in 2 simple ways. You only get 2 different actions on your turn. So very simple to teach, very simple to play. You can either draft a face-up card from the center of the table, or you can play a band of cards from your hand. All that means is that when you're taking a card to your hand, you're trying to collect these sets of different monsters or different heroes to try to fill out a band of cards the best you can. Playing a band, what that means is that you can place anywhere from 1 up to 5 or 6 different cards from your hand to create that set or that band of heroes. That specific hero gives you an action, and also the amount of cards you play is by how much strength you have to put down a token on one of the regions on the board. As you're controlling these different regions, the scoring is really tight because whoever has the majority in a region scores the victory points at the end of that round. There's only 3 rounds in the game, so if you're controlling a few of the regions for a couple out of those 3 rounds, you're doing very well. So like I said, very tight, a lot of tension in this game, and just a lot of fun every time we've played it. Alright, and my number 42 game is another game that is new to the list this year. Got it played a few times over the last year, but it is a very heavy game, very complicated game. It takes a few hours to play, so it's not going to be for everyone, but definitely was a game for me. Anytime I've gotten it to that table and played it, I've really enjoyed it. And this game is Food Chain Magnate. So in Food Chain Magnate, it's a lot of fun because you are running your own fast food industry. You are setting up billboards and doing marketing around the town to try to get the different neighborhoods of people to want to purchase the food or the drinks that you are making above your opponents. So it is very in your face. The marketing is very tactical and can be very mean because you can basically sneak into other players' neighborhoods and put on their billboard something that you can produce but they can't produce. So basically, if you have what they want and your opponents no longer have everything they want, they'll come to your restaurant instead of their restaurant. So it can be very mean. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of strategic marketing and trying to price your product the best you can, because also people will go to usually to the product that is cheaper than more expensive, depending on the distance you are away from their house. So it's kind of realistic in the way that that market works, and just a lot of fun. You get points in various ways. You are building out, starting from the CEO, which is you in the company, you're building out your structure of employees. Every turn, you're playing out as many employees as you legally can to then do actions for you. And like I said, just to kind of manipulate the market and produce goods for different neighborhoods around the town to have them come to your restaurant instead of your opponent's restaurants. So that is Food Chain Magnate. Okay, and finally, my number 41 game was my number 34 game back in 2018, but fell off the list last year, and I think it's resurfacing because I'm getting excited to play the second edition of this game when I can finally get my hands on it. But anytime I think about this game, I just remember how much I enjoyed playing it back when I did play it a couple years ago. So kind of a strange one again that I haven't played for a couple of years, but just one that I'm just very excited to play again. And anytime I think about it, I remember how fun it was. And this game is Eclipse. So like I said, I'm very excited to get Eclipse Second Dawn to the Galaxy, that second edition of the game, to the table. But it's It's a Euro-style 4X game where you're exploring different regions of the board. You're expanding out your troops onto these regions to then gather resources and exploit those resources from those different planets. And those resources that you get, and also the other X's, you can exterminate people, so there's combat, which we'll get into later. But the resources that you gather are really fun because you can buy different upgrades for your ships and really make each of your ships very, very unique. Each one of your different classes of ship can be completely different than any of your opponent's ships. It's got this really cool layout on your player board of these different grids that you can place tiles in for different types of your ships to really make them unique with either defenses or making them fly faster and further, or adding cannons onto your ship to make them stronger and attacking, so you can really customize it. That's my favorite part of this game, is everything is so customizable, and you can make your army of troops vastly unique from any of the other players' armies. So that is a ton of fun and what I like the most. Also, back to the extermination type of thing with combat, there is quite a bit of combat in this game. It's not super combat heavy, but when combat does happen to try to take over a region, it is just crazy. It's just a boatload of ships attacking a boatload of other ships, and it feels like this huge battle that's taking place. And when the dust settles and everything goes back to normal, you see who the winner is and who took over that planet. And you're taking over these planets not only for the resources, but also to try to get victory points in different ways. And after the set amount of rounds is over, whoever has the most victory points after all that is done is the winner. There is just so much to do in this game that I just have a ton of fun every time I play it. Again, another game that's not going to be for everybody, but if you like that idea of exploring these different planets and kind of doing your own thing, and all in the meanwhile, if somebody gets in your way, you try to take them out with your cannons, then this game might be for you, so give it a try. All right, everybody, and that does it for today's list. My games 50 down to 41 out of my top 50 favorite board games of all time. I have had a lot of fun making this list and a lot of fun making these videos, so I hope you enjoy them, and it'll be even more and more fun as we get closer and closer to the top game of all time. Like I said, we're getting the rest of the Talking Cardboard crew involved when we get to the top 10 games, so you have a snapshot of what different people's opinions are on what their top favorite games are, and not just mine. So that'll be a ton of fun as well. As always, leave comments below with your favorite games, and I love to comment back and forth with you. And if you like what you see here on the channel, please consider subscribing. We always appreciate that as well. So with that, you all have a great day.